Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Our
Oh,
mission: Helping Parents Heal is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents to become shining light parents by providing support and resources to aid in the healing process. We go a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and evidence for the afterlife in a non dogmatic way. Affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non religious background. Attendance today at this meeting is voluntary, and we are here for the benefit of learning from and sharing with other parents whose child has passed away. It is understood that our discussions are intended to be confidential and not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. However, these Zoom meetings are helpful to parents all around the world, and they are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members who are not able to attend this meeting live can also watch. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers to allow parents to be informed about many possible ways to heal, to connect with their children, and to learn about the afterlife. The views expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of Helping Parents Heal, and we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you could be here this evening.
yes, and welcome to William Peters. We're just so thrilled to have you here. I'm going to read a short bio so that all of you know a little bit about him. William Peters, MA, MED, is the founder of the Shared Crossing Project, whose mission is to raise awareness and educate people about the profound and healing experiences that are possible for the dying and for their loved ones. As the director of the Shared Crossing Research Initiative, SCRI, William and his team collect and study extraordinary end-of-life experiences, shared crossings, and are recognized as the world's leading authority on shared death experience. He has developed methods to facilitate these shared crossings and to assist experiencers in meaningfully integrating their experiences. William conducts workshops and presents nationally on his research. He is a licensed psychotherapist at the Family Therapy Institute in Santa Barbara, where he specializes in end-of-life counseling as a means toward psycho-spiritual evolution. William has served as a Zen hospice volunteer, and his work is informed by his 2 near-death experiences and a variety of shared death experiences. He will be launching his new book, At Heaven's Door: What Shared Journeys to the Afterlife Teach About Dying Well and Living Better Tomorrow. So this is coming out tomorrow, and it's going to be available then. So we are very, very grateful to have him here with us this evening. So please join me in welcoming William Peters. Welcome, William.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's always good to be with your community. I feel like the messages that we receive in Shared Crossings are so important to your community and bring hope, and I just love it because I know so many people in the book, as Michelle will go on and tell her story in a moment, are parents, and particularly mothers who have lost their children. And so I don't even like saying lost, their children died. And the information we get, the research yields that from what we can tell, our children remain in contact with us. They want to be in our lives, and they're doing quite well.
That's beautiful. Yes, they haven't even died. They're actually still right here. They've just transitioned to another place, right? But anyway, I would love for you to explain what a shared death experience is so that people understand what you're talking about, first of all, before Michelle maybe explains what happened with hers.
Sure. So the shared death experience occurs when you have somebody dying and there's caregivers or loved ones, and in some cases just a bystander, who reports that they feel like they shared in the journey of the dying from this human life into what lies beyond. Commonly, the term we hear all the time is into an afterlife. And so the experiencer, the shared death experiencer, will get an opportunity to share in this journey, because that's the dominant motif, is that there is a journey from this life into a benevolent afterlife, and the shared death experiencer gets to see that, gets to experience it. And there's a variety of ways in which they experience it, but it's very similar to the near-death experience. That's why it seems like the terrain that we're talking about that comes right after the human existence is basically identifiable. It's knowable. The shared death experience and the near-death experience literature really do affirm one another's findings.
Well, and I wanted to ask you, you have experienced 2 near-death experiences, as well as numerous shared death experiences. And so is this the reason that you became so interested in this field? Is that why you wanted to be able to tell people about what other people are experiencing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm smiling because, I never thought that my life and my work would be dedicated to this mission of, getting people to realize that these experiences happen, and they're profound, and they're transformative, and they're affirming to life and to all of our loved ones, that we know that no matter what happens at death, no matter when it happens, the bond, the connection remains. And so, but what happened to me was, I had the 2 near-death experiences. I had a lot of shared death experiences, and I had a lot of death in my family. Just because my family, half of my family, my mother's side, grew up in an area in Marin County, just north of San Francisco, where there's a fair amount of cancer, a high propensity towards cancer. So a lot of people, particularly women, were dying early of cancer. And we had, and also on both sides of my family, to be really clear. So death was something that was around a lot. And then I worked in Central and South America during 2 civil wars, one in Guatemala and one in Peru. So it was really handed to me that this is going to be the work that, I didn't have to do it, but now I'm really excited about it, because I feel that people, when they hear these stories, the feedback is so people are so thrilled to hear that, yeah, death it's hard. I don't need to tell. All the people that are on this call know what it's like to lose somebody you love in the human form. Yes, you can still have a relationship with them, but when they leave the human form, it's devastating. And yet these experiences affirm that the relationship continues in some way. And that we actually, if we take it to the next step, and this is something that's not in it's in the book in this area when I talk about how to use the shared death experience. One thing to keep in mind is the shared death experience is a doorway to a deeper relationship, to continue to foster that bond. So if you know that you had this relationship at the time of their death, that is to say that you were witness to their transition, then you have the invitation to continue that. And that to me is very, very positive. So when you ask me, if you were asking me how I got into this work, I was reluctant, but over the last, 15 years, I have really been inspired by it.
That's beautiful. And I'd love to hear if you have an idea of why this is, why some parents and some people who have loved ones transition experience this shared death crossing, and some people don't. Do you have any? I know that you have tips on how to be able to better experience this, but could you tell us about that, please?
This is perhaps the greatest mystery in the shared death experience. Like, why do some people have it and why others not? In our research, we do see a few factors, if you will, causal factors. One is if a loved one has a practice, let's say, has some sort of spiritual practice, and that could be meditation, that could be yoga, that could be prayer. There seems to be something about that ability to hold one's concentration or focus steady. We also see that, so we see that as a general factor. It's not exclusive. In other words, you don't have to have that, but we do see a higher preponderance of that characteristic in our experiencers. Now, I'll be clear, these are just people that are coming to us. One of the things that's happening in our research is we're hoping to get a wider net of people, more diversity. So this isn't our first significant round of, now, and when the book was written, it was 134 experiencer cases. Now we have 225 and a little bit more than that, but the data is holding up. The other piece I would say, and this probably doesn't apply to your particular population, if you've lost children, it was often sudden and tragic and unexpected. But we do see this in other populations in our study, and that is that if people are at peace with the death, if they are in acceptance of the fact that their loved one is dying, and they've been able to work out any relational differences, unfinished business, unreconciled, whatever it is, to that extent they can work that out, they'll have more psycho-emotional clearing, if you will. That type of unfinished business can cause interference in these experiences. So, but like I said, I want to say that quite sensitively, because my understanding of your community is most people had their children die in not, desirable situations at all. They were, like I said, sudden, unexpected, often tragic. So I want to be careful when I say that, because if you're a lot of people most people don't have shared death experiences from what we can tell in the literature, although we don't know how many people have had them. What we do know is this: people do not feel comfortable talking about them. They don't feel safe talking about them. They feel often that if they do share, especially in a medical setting, that they might be judged, that they might be discounted or dismissed, and worse yet, they might be identified as having some sort of hallucination around grief. So there are a lot of factors that can, I believe at this time, that are keeping the shared death experience under wraps.
Well, that's very interesting. And I just want to say that being a part of this project has really helped me to be able to understand that what happened with me and Morgan, even though it was all the way over in Tibet, was a shared death experience. And it's helped me to move forward and heal more quickly. I wanted to find out from Michelle as well, how her own shared death experience has been able to help her move forward and heal. And I also wanted to maybe let everybody here know that you might have experienced a shared death experience without actually realizing it until you hear a little bit more about what that entails. So, Michelle, could you tell us a little bit about your shared death experience? And are you muted? You're muted. I need to make sure that you unmute. Here we go. Can you unmute? There we go.
I'm trying to unmute myself and it wasn't letting me.
Sorry.
Hi, everybody. Some of you might know me already. I'm Michelle Johnston. I'm one of the group leaders of the Philadelphia affiliate, and I joined Helping Parents Heal a few years ago. I actually have 2 children in spirit, and I was lucky enough, I guess, to have a magnificent shared death experience with my first child to pass, and that was my baby son Benjamin back in 1995, such a long time ago. If he was still here, he'd be turning, 26, 27 this year. But I remember this experience like it was yesterday afternoon. Ben was born in a pretty catastrophic circumstance, I guess. I went into premature labor and was rushed to hospital, and he was born and he came out, and he was doing really well. He weighed 2 entire pounds, and the hospital thought that that was fantastic, and he was doing very well. My husband had come in and met Ben, and the hospital was convinced that Ben was going to be okay. So sent my husband and my sister home. And because I had had a huge amount of surgery, it wasn't just a normal cesarean, I hadn't yet been able to see him. And I was lying on the recovery, I was in a recovery ward, and I was on some kind of table. And I thought I was in that room by myself. And I had this experience, and that was so profound. It was the most amazing thing I have ever experienced. I wasn't awake, but I wasn't asleep. I was kind of in that in between transition zone, you know, almost like I was meditating, but I wasn't deliberately meditating. And in my experience, in my mind, I left my body and I was in this other realm, this other place. It was just the most magnificent thing. This is years before I ever owned a computer, but you know, the Microsoft Office landscape, it's this beautiful, gentle, rolling hill. I was in a landscape like that. It was so green and the colors were vivid and peaceful. And there was one tree halfway up the hill on the left-hand side. It was a weeping willow tree. And Ben and my son that I already had, Luke, they, in this vision, they were running up this hill and they were laughing and giggling, and I was running behind them, and we were all so happy. I can still feel it. It was just so joyous. And I was calling out to them, wait for mummy, wait for mummy. And as they ran under this tree, Luke, my now living son, kept running. And in this dream, he was about 4 and Ben was about 3. But Ben stopped underneath the tree and turned around and held out his hand to me. And it was just, I just remember in this vision running up, and I was about to reach out and grab his hand. I can picture exactly what he looked. He actually looks like what I now look like. He was wearing little glasses and he had brown curly hair. Anyway, I ran up and I reached out to grab his hand. And right as I reached for him, the nurse in the hospital shook me and woke me up and said, Michelle, I'm so sorry, but Ben's not going to make it. She had noticed that I had written Catholic on my intake form, and she asked me, did I want to get a priest to come and baptize him and give him his last rites at the same time. And just that juxtaposition of being in this incredible space with my boys, and then all of a sudden being back on the bed. I can't even describe how I got from there back to here. It wasn't like a physical thing, it was in my mind, but it was just such, I still remember it. It was just like this, almost like someone threw a bucket of cold water over my face, like that changing from one to the other. And anyway, my husband came back in, and they put me in a wheelchair and wheeled me up. And the first time I got to meet Ben was actually as I was holding him while he was dying, which was, it was awful. And I miss him like crazy. But a year after I had and lost Ben, I had another child, my daughter Grace. And Grace was named Grace because it was just an absolute miracle that she was here. And she and Luke were just the loves of my life. We were very similar, Grace and I, very, very close. And when she was 19, she was involved in a horrific car accident. Elizabeth, please tell me if I'm talking for too long. But I didn't have any notion that she was going to be in the accident. I didn't have any kind of, you know, what's the word, premonition or anything. But I was woken at 3 o'clock in the morning and was told that she had been in a terrible accident and that she may not make it. She was critically injured. And my new husband, because I had divorced from the other husband in the interim, drove me to hospital to get to Grace. And as we got in the car and we were driving to hospital, I was in the passenger seat and I started having these visions of Grace's life. Like, do you remember when we were kids and we had one of those things that you used to click and the pictures clunked around? It was a viewfinder, I think it was called. It was like someone was doing a viewfinder of all these moments of Grace's life. And it wasn't moments that were in a photo album. It was moments that I didn't have pictures of. like me hanging her little pink and white striped socks on the clothesline, or the glow in the dark stars on the roof of her bedroom. So I got upset at the time. I thought it meant she was going to die, and because I was having her life review. And that happened. She ended up being on life support for a whole month, and I had that happen the whole time. And then my dad, who had previously passed almost 4 years before, started to come and visit me in the hospital room and stand in the doorway and make it very known to me that he was coming to collect Grace. And Dad, as we were growing up, was always the person to fix things and make everything better. And he was dressed in his usual clothing, and he looked happy and well. And I knew that he had come to get her, and I got angry at him because I didn't want to let her go. But eventually she passed after we had to turn off her life support, and she died in my arms 3 days later. But and I didn't have anything amazing happen when she actually passed. The moment I did feel her essence leave the room, and I could see the physical change as she was lying there in my arms. But I didn't have anything like I had with Ben. But afterwards, I started to have unbelievable visitations from Grace and Ben. So Ben, who hadn't come through to me at all in the 20 years between both of their deaths, started to come through to me after I lost Grace. So
that's beautiful. And I'll tell you, I think that what's really wonderful is to know that your dad was there to pick up Grace, and just to know that all three of them are having a blast together, and they're having, well, I think it's also wonderful that that William has been able to write about this. But going back to William, I wanted to ask you, could you tell us, I know that near-death experiences are something that a lot of people know a lot about. It's a phenomenon that's very, very frequently talked about. Why is it that shared death experiences aren't so well known? Could you maybe expound on that a little bit? Wait, you're muted, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. There we go.
There you go. Yeah, you're asking another great question. And, when Raymond Moody was the first researcher to write a pretty significant book on it, really introductory book on the SDE, and he did it in 2009. Now, Raymond was fully anticipating that this book, Glimpses of Eternity, would be as popular as some of his other books on the NDE. And as it turned out, it just didn't get a lot of traction. And I've talked to Raymond a great deal about this and some other researchers. Why is it that the shared death experience hasn't gotten the attention that the NDE has? And we don't have any clear responses other than there is something, the NDE has a lot of, the NDE is interesting. When you hear an NDE experiencer, it can be very much like you listen to a great story, but it's happening to somebody else. So you can, and there's one like Anita Morjani tells these great stories, Eben Alexander. These are phenomenal stories that have captured the public's imagination. The SDE hits a little closer to home. And the reason why is because every single one of us is going to die, and our loved ones are going to die. And I think there's a bit of hesitancy about letting the SDE in because it means that we have to actually embrace death and dying. That's a theory. I'm not saying that's the way it is, but I can tell you when I started teaching about the shared death experience in hospices in particular, hospice workers would all say, yes, we've seen these experiences. We've heard loved ones talk about them. But I said, well, why don't we talk more about it? Well, here's the other piece, the response to your question. Well, we don't have any way to explain it. Like the medical institution that holds death, essentially for us, doesn't have a way of making sense of these experiences. And that's a clear reason why. Because the medical community believes that the brain creates consciousness. That's just a fundamental belief in medical sciences. So this shared death experience runs completely contrary to that. So basically, these experiences have been held up a great deal in the difficulty to explain how they happen, to make sense of them. So there's two reasons I put forth there. One was I think the SDE hits a little closer to home. And the second one is I think the medical community can't make sense of them. And so they get captured and held, quite frankly, right in the hospices.
That's very interesting. And I know that you've had 2 near-death experiences as well. Could you tell us just a little bit about them and explain how it changed the way that you lived your own life when you did have those near-death experiences?
Yes. So when I was 17 years old, just living a typical suburban, high schooler's life, I went up skiing. I was, and this is in Lake Tahoe, California, pretty much a typical morning skiing with a friend, John. And I was going down a rather, it was a difficult slope, but no big deal. And I caught an edge. And so what happens when you do that is your front, in my case, the front of my skis crossed up and it catapulted me into the air and I sailed a long way. And when I landed, my bindings did not release. So my back crunched. I literally compressed and fractured my lumbar region of my spine. Everything went dead in the moment and I sailed away from my body. And I remember moving quickly away from it, seeing Lake Tahoe, the continental North America, then a satellite view of Earth. Very peaceful, very much enjoying it all. It really was like no big deal. It's like, okay, this is where I am. And I had a life review that showed me a number of things about my life. Basically that, I needed to live a little bit, I needed to live a more honest, kind of contributory life. When I was an adolescent, 17 years old, there's not much you're interested in other than yourself. So I wasn't too hard on me for that one, but I got that I had to really live more in integrity. And then I ran into the light, and it was there that I realized I was dying and I did not want to die. And unlike most near-death experiencers who are kind of pleading to stay over there, to basically not have to go back to Earth, I did not. I wanted to come back, and so I came back. And that experience, to answer your question directly, did not register in my conscious mind in any way. Like there was no way. Just for whatever reason, I never even thought about it. I never talked about it. I remembered it once when I was watching a TV show and somebody was talking about their near-death experience. I think I was in my early 20s. But I talked with my mother about it and she didn't know what to do with it. So I learned pretty quickly, no one's really that interested, at least in my immediate family and friends. I had another shared death experience. I'll say it briefly, a blood imbalance in when I was like 30 years old in an ICU. I was floating above my body for, I think, 4+ hours. And I was observing life in the ICU on the 10th floor of Kaiser Hospital, Oakland. Once again, totally content, very much at peace, no need to change anything. I didn't even really realize that I was there in a certain way. I was just kind of an observing, witnessing entity. It wasn't until the doctor came in the wee hours of the morning, tapped on my hand and said, Mr. Peters, Mr. Peters. And then I realized I couldn't feel my hand being tapped on, but I did realize it was me because I could see my face and he was talking to me. Then I had this question, do I go back into my body or not? And I really sat with that question. I said, what if I didn't respond? Or what if I did respond? So all these kind of deep questions when you're out of body, I didn't have a lot of experience with this. And so I thought, so I did respond to him. And in that moment, I went back into my body and I could remember coming back into my body and seeing him through my human eyes, which was different than just moments before when I was looking down at him from above. So these experiences taught me this. I am not my body. Whatever I identify with as myself, William, anything like that, that is not related in any dependent way to my physical body. And that would help me later because as I went into my hospice work and would have some shared death experiences, I was really comfortable when I popped out of my body and was above. In this one case I'll share with you right now, and it is in the book. This is Ron. Ron is at the very end of his life, and he had been a merchant marine, so he traveled all over the world, and he loved being read stories about adventure. So I was reading him Jack London's Call of the Wild one afternoon. I'd been reading it to him multiple afternoons in the previous days. And right when I'm reading it, I pop out of my body, and there I am. I'm comfortable. I'm at peace, a little stunned. But what really got me was there was Ron. Ron is on my right side, looking right at me with this big, beautiful face, white, shiny teeth, and he is really happy. He's almost saying to me, check this out, William. Look at where I am, and kind of glad to have you up here. So that was the extent of the communication. I don't know how long I stayed up there, but I did come back into my body sometime later. I don't even think I stopped reading, to be honest with you. I think my sense is, if you were to push me, I'd say it was a parallel realm or universe, if you will. But I talked to my supervisor about that right afterwards. I was excited, and I said, hey, Eric, I want to share this experience with you. And he was a veteran of hospice. He'd been working in hospice for decades and had barely been trained during the AIDS epidemic. And he just looked at me and said, William, phenomena rolling by, let it go. Now, I should say, this was the Zen Hospice Project in San Francisco, very progressive, but very Buddhist. So, you don't hold on to your experiences very long, just kind of have your phenomena and then you'll let it go by. But that was disappointing to me, but it also affirmed this experience that no one really wants to hear about these experiences. Like, they just don't know what to do with them. And so I would have more of these in hospice, but I wouldn't share them with anybody. So this goes back to one of the first questions you were asking me, Elizabeth, like, why did I write this? Like, why did I do this work? Increasingly, I've been more impassioned to get the word out about this. And when I first met Michelle and we had a conversation, she shared her experience, and she's a perfect example. She'd had these experiences. They were profound for her, but she was really relieved and pleased to know that it had a label, that there's a whole typology, that there are known phenomena, that there are after effects, and that she was having them, and that she can make space for them in her life. This is what we need to do. I think, if you ask me, and this is the mission of the Shared Crossing Project, is to positively transform our relationship to end of life through the education and raising awareness about these end of life experiences. The second piece of the mission is to bring communities together, to bring people together to dialogue about their experiences. So like, when I get an opportunity to talk to your community, I'm like really excited, because this is something that your community can talk about. Some people will have the experiences, some people won't, but we can all learn from them.
That's beautiful. And I want to say that Glimpses of Eternity was one of the books that saved me. I also was saved by Life After Life. I read that 2 days after Morgan passed, because everything that Raymond Moody said in that book echoed what I was feeling. But then to be able to know that it wasn't just kind of a offshoot of a near-death experience, it was actually something that was called a shared death experience, was very, very reassuring to me. And I also just wanted to ask you, because I think this is important, you have a subtitle for your book. So the subtitle of your book says that shared journeys can teach us how to die well and live better. Could you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the dying well part is, if we know these experiences are possible, if we know that it's possible to have a shared death experience, we're learning how to facilitate them and enable them. And that's a part of the Shared Crossing Project. And we're having some success with that. But so if you know they're possible, then you can prepare. Like anything you want to achieve in your life, any experience you want to have, there's preparation. So, if you're right now, I presume I'm looking behind you, Elizabeth, you have a beautiful mountain. It looks like somewhere in the Himalayas. I'm not sure about that, but it could be, because I'm seeing Tibetan prayer flags there. So if you want to hike that, climb that mountain, it takes preparation. Well, death is probably the greatest journey we're going to do in our lives, and we're all going to do it. And there's a lot of preparation. And a lot of people say, well, prepare for death. Well, yeah, that's kind of the natural kind of modern response to that question, to that challenge. How do you prepare for death? There's a lot of things you can do to prepare for death. And the first thing to do is to study and learn, what do we know about what happens at the moment of death, or even before death? And this is where, and Michelle is one of our senior researchers, quite helpful and knows this literature very well. In addition to the shared death experience, I created a spectrum of end-of-life experiences, because I found when I was studying the near-death experience and working with my clients in my clinical work, that they would have all sorts of experiences around death: pre-death premonitions, pre-death dreams, visions, and visitations. Terminal lucidity is this amazing experience that happens that Betty White just kind of showed for the whole nation. Here she is dying, and she's looking up and she's calling out to Alan. Like, this is what we call a terminally lucid moment. Like, just before someone dies, they come to, they get a bit brighter and active, and they express something that their caregivers, loved ones are saying, what's going on here? This is a terminally lucid moment. It's also a shared death experience. If Alan is actually there, then she's actually being visited by a departed loved one, and that's Alan. So that's a shared death experience. So there's also, after death, there's communications, there's post-death, direct post-death communications, and visions and visitations. And there are synchronicities throughout. You have a beautiful synchronicity that you share with me. You share with me many times, and it's in the book. You talk about is it the Toyota Tacoma? What
Tacoma.
car is it?
It's a Toyota Tacoma, yes.
Tacoma, yes. And these are things that if you share these in the scientific community and say, oh, I think of Morgan when I see the Toyota Tacoma, they're going to look like you're crazy. But I'm going to tell you, in our research, which I was reticent to take on synchronicities, this goes well beyond probability. So these experiences are real. They happen. So the first step in dying well is get prepared for the signs, the symbols, the phenomena that can accompany you and all your loved ones as you approach death and after it. And what you will find, I think, is that death is full of all of these messages, all of this communication, all of this relating across the veil. And then once you've done that, then there's other psycho-spiritual, emotional steps to take. Really do an inventory of your life. Really dialogue with your family members and loved ones about getting into right relationship with everybody. Look at your regrets, apologize, forgive, have compassion, reconcile as much as your life as you can. And then the third step is to really honor with everybody that is in your life that you know that you're going to die or that they're going to die, and you want to talk about it. Have those difficult conversations. You don't just get up one morning and start trying to climb that beautiful mountain behind you. You have to prepare for it. You have to talk about it. You have to decide what you want and what you don't want, and really let everybody around you know that. And the last thing is the hardest piece is, like I said, the Shared Crossing Project is, I've developed these protocols that we teach, and they teach people essentially this. When somebody is crossing over, we've taught them how they can train themselves to remember how to call back to their loved ones. Now, this is a whole training that's called the Pathways, but just know that is available to you. And if you just take anything from like the basic protocol is, if you are dying, remember, ask for help when you're transitioning from your guides or whoever it is that you feel is there with you, and tell them, I want to call back to my departed loved ones, as Morgan did for you, to let you know that he is okay, and that you don't need to worry about him and that he'll stay in touch with you. So that's how you die well. And it takes effort. And the biggest effort is probably the cultural taboo, because we don't like to talk about death. But if you do, you'll find it is such a rich topic and so much comes up and there's so much to connect with people around. That's not to say there's fears and there's grief and all that, but there's also the joy of being able to express to your loved ones how much you've appreciated living this life with them, and that you know that you're going to be departing, or that they are, and that this life is precious. And that's the second piece, living well. So
that's beautiful. And I think that you touched on something that's very important. And I think that a lot of our parents experience this, that they have those premonitions and that their kids actually tell them that they will be leaving early. Morgan told me that he was going to be not coming home from China when we were packing in his room. And I didn't want to believe that, but he was very certain of that. I think that a lot of these kids know deep down inside that something's going to happen, which makes, I believe, that whole transition a lot easier, because you look back and tell yourself, well, this was something that he even knew was going to happen. I don't think it always happens in every case. I wanted to just say, for the Toyota Tacoma, I don't ever believe it until I see 3 red ones. So if I see one go by and I'm trying to make a decision, and I tell Morgan, okay, I need 2 more of those Toyota Tacomas, and then I see 2 more that drive by, then I realize that whatever I'm trying to decide is on the positive side, that I need to go forward with it. But we have a lot of people in the chat box saying that they believe that they have had shared death experiences. I would love for you and Michelle to maybe let them know, are you going to be doing any more work on this? Is this your final work, or can they get in touch with you, and how do they get in touch with you? And maybe you could tell a little bit more about that.
Great. So yes, we are continuing to do the research. So if you have a shared death experience, what we invite you to do is go to our contact page at sharedcrossing.com. And on our contact page, there is information for how you can connect with us, share your story. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. And it's all pretty self-explanatory there. And I should say, Michelle, who's just the architect for our new website, will correct me. Am I right about that, Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Good. So that's good. So I've got that one down. Here's the other thing I really want to emphasize is that if I just saw, I think it was Sarah on the chat, say that she had, her son told her 6 months before he died that something about his upcoming death. Now I could be saying, excuse me if I didn't say that right, Sarah, but I think that's what I saw there. And so we want to encourage everybody, if you've had a pre-death premonition, if you've had pre-death dream or vision or visitation or terminal lucidity or a post-death visitation of any kind, and all those synchronicities, we want to hear them. I'm putting, right now I'm planning another book, which is going to be on the spectrum of end-of-life experiences. I would suggest that you go to our website and look at Shared Crossings there, and you'll see what that spectrum looks like and the different things we're looking at. But I've already listed them here. And basically, if it's any communication across the veil or any extraordinary communication that seems unexplainable, we want to hear it. So
you're on it. Well,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you something. I believe that there are 27 different accounts in the book that you have right now. Could you tell us where these come from? I know that they're from all over the world, and if they are mostly from parents, or if you have people in other situations, I'd love to just hear who has spoken for your book, who you've interviewed for the first book. That would be wonderful.
Great. So we did try and select for diversity. And when I say that, we tried to do geographic diversity. So the first piece is we have, I think Michelle was in Australia. We actually have somebody else in Australia too. We have a few people from Great Britain. We have somebody in Norway. We have diversity. We also have a few people from Canada, diversity across the United States. So a couple of people from the South, New England, California. We have, well, I think we have like 6 people from Santa Barbara, but that's where I'm from. So that makes sense. And then in terms of relationships, we have about, I want to say we have 4 or 5 kids. In other words, parents that have lost children. And then we have a lot of daughters who've lost mothers or fathers. And then we have a number of sons who have lost parents as well. So that, and then we have some spouses. I think we have 1, 2, 3. I think we have 4 cases in which partners, spouses, no more than that, 6, that where significant other spouses have died. And so they're different. And what you'll find is that each of these stories I've selected because it points out some significant feature or features about the shared death experience. So while the stories are riveting, each of them is done in a way to kind of define the typologies that I've created. And I created the typologies so that, the general public will have a sense for the map of these shared death experiences. But really, I wanted healthcare providers, end-of-life workers of all types, and mental health professionals and spiritual counselors and chaplains to be able to have a research-based map so that they could help their clients, their patients, what have you, know that this is right here. You see this experience is right here. You can read chapter 3 with Nancy or something. So yes, and there's 28 stories.
28. Well,
Yeah.
I wanted to say too that Dr. Christopher Kerr, I know that you're going to be speaking at our conference. He's also going to be speaking. So maybe the 2 of you can get together at the conference and talk a little bit about all of his shared death experiences that he's been chronicling as well in Death is But a Dream, that I just love as well. So I don't know if you guys work together at all. And you're on other ends of the country. Obviously, he's in Buffalo and you're in Santa Barbara, but it seems like what you guys are doing is very similar in terms of cataloging all of these shared death experiences and near-death experiences as well in a hospice situation for him.
Yeah, let me say a little bit about that, because Dr. Christopher Kerr is a wonderful, fabulous researcher and really dedicated to validating what he calls end-of-life dreams. For us in our typology, I call that end of life, or I call that pre-death visions and visitations. So and Chris has done a marvelous job of laying it out. He really understands it well. But be clear now, what he's not doing, he doesn't study shared death experiences. He does end-of-life dreams, which we call pre-death visions and visitations. And those are experiences where the dying will have communication, typically with a deceased relative who's there to welcome them. Profound, absolutely. But doesn't have the same phenomena as a shared death experience, nor a near-death experience. But it's good. I'm glad he's going to be there. He's spectacular. He's a wonderful guy.
A little different, but it's similar in terms of raising awareness for all of these amazing phenomena that are happening. I also wanted to, before I forget, I want to let everybody on here know that you're being interviewed, and maybe Michelle as well, by Dr. Eben Alexander tomorrow for the launch of the book, because it comes out tomorrow and it's going to be an amazing interview. It is free of charge, if I understand correctly. And we have a link to it on our events page. So if you all want to learn more, or if you're watching this after and you're interested in attending another live meeting with William and with Michelle and with Dr. Eben Alexander, please join them tomorrow. What time is that one? Do you remember exactly?
Yes, it is 5 o'clock Pacific time,
So
8 o'clock Eastern time.
8 o'clock. It's the same time as tonight.
Same time as tonight. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. And I just want to also say that the book itself, it's coming out obviously tomorrow, is fascinating. William is a wonderful writer. I think that everyone here will learn something from it. But again, I think that one of the things that it's going to teach everyone is that even if you didn't have a full-blown shared death experience with your child as they transitioned, I'm sure you're going to recognize elements of what he is describing. And I do believe that these shared death experiences help us to be able to heal more quickly. And when we recognize them in our own experiences, I think that it helps us to be able to move forward and heal. And I think, Michelle, would you agree with that? Do you feel that those two experiences that you had with your son and your daughter helped you to be able to move forward and heal?
Absolutely. And I wish I knew 20 years ago that the experience I had with Ben was a shared death experience. But when I found out that I'd had one with both, and I immediately, I actually watched William talking on an HPH video, and I emailed him, and I then started volunteering for him, and now I'm working for him. And I feel like I've picked both of my kids up and that we all go to work together and do something. It's beautiful.
That's so wonderful. People are saying in the chat box, beautiful, Michelle. Laura is saying, so excited to see you all at the August conference, as well as I'm just very, very excited to have all of these wonderful resources in one place. Obviously, I know Irene is as well. It's going to be so nice to be able to have all of our parents hear this face to face with you, with Michelle. Michelle, are you going to be at the conference as well?
I'm hoping to, Elizabeth, but I'm moving back to Australia to around
It all
that.
depends on it all depends on how difficult it's going to be to come back again, right? Well, in any case, I wanted to see if, William, you have some parting words of wisdom for us in terms of shared death experiences that can help us as we move forward and ultimately heal as a group.
Yeah. Well, I think the goal is to just realize that these experiences can happen, and to be compassionate with yourself, because I know as a therapist, having worked with, mothers in particular, but also fathers, that they feel like, if they didn't have this experience, somehow they don't understand why. And I just want to say that we don't know why this experience happens. We're learning about it, but to have compassion for yourself if you didn't have it. And I think that's really important. At the same time, be welcome to hearing other stories about people who have had them, because you may, at some point, something may resonate with you that could be healing in those stories. One of the things we know about the after effects of shared death experiencers is it's almost like clinical, like we just hear it all the time. I know my loved one is alive and well in a beautiful afterlife. I know that I'll see them again, and their fear of death is greatly alleviated, and the grieving process is much improved. Grief is always difficult when you lose someone, but when you have these experiences, or if you can realize that your loved one is alive and well somewhere and that you'll see them again, take that to heart. Know that from all that we've studied, all that we've researched, not just me, but other researchers, you don't have the data to say that. All the data points to a continuation of something beyond this life that's good. Take heart in that. Take heart in that.
That's beautiful. And yes, I agree with you. I have to say that in the darkest moment, when I was finding out that Morgan was not breathing, as you know, at the base camp of Mount Everest, and I was able to have the phone put up to his ear and tell him that we loved him, that we were proud of him, and not to be afraid. And to get that hug that I got from 8,000 miles away, it was absolutely amazing. And that is something that keeps me going every single day. It keeps a smile on my face because I feel like he's with me all the time. And I want everybody to understand that our kids are not gone. They're not in another place. They are still right here with us, and they are working just as hard to connect with us as we are to connect with them. And they are all our biggest cheerleaders. They're going to help us do it. And as we move forward, and especially in 2022, which has incredibly healing energy, we are going to learn how to do that. We're going to learn how to communicate with our kids. We're going to be learning more and more about these shared death experiences. And we're going to move forward as a collective and heal. And thank you so much, William and Michelle, for being here. And I am excited about tomorrow night as well. I hope we have lots of our parents who are going to be attending that as well. And it's time now. So Irene always asks everyone to unmute and to say thank you and good night. And thank you.
Yes, thank
both.
you. What a great night. Thank you so much, both of you, for being
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Very, very
Thank
interesting.
you.